The Great Hall of the Nexus Station was the largest room in the known galaxy. Its walls were made of living crystal that changed color with the mood of those inside. Today, the crystals glowed a calm blue. Representatives from 47 different alien species had gathered for an important meeting. They came from worlds scattered across thousands of light years. Some were tall and thin. Others were short and round. A few had no solid form at all. But they all had one thing in common. They believed they understood the universe. Ambassador Velith stood at the center of the hall. She was a Primari, a species known for their great intelligence. Her skin was pale and almost see-through. When light hit her body, it passed right through like she was made of glass. She moved with careful grace as she prepared to speak. The other representatives watched her closely. The Primari were respected. When they spoke, others listened. Fellow members of the Galactic Council, Velith began. Her voice was soft but carried to every corner of the room. We are here to discuss a newly discovered planet. Our long-range sensors found it 3 cycles ago in a quiet arm of the galaxy. The native creatures there call it Earth. She waved her hand, and a hologram appeared above her head. It showed a planet covered in blue and green and white. It was spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Many of the representatives leaned forward to look. The planet was pretty. The pretty things were often dangerous. Our science teams have studied this world carefully, Velith continued. I will now share what they found. She began to list the facts. The planet had wild temperature changes. In some places, it was so cold that water turned to stone. In other places, it was so hot that the ground itself could burn flesh. The air was filled with a gas called oxygen. To most species in the galaxy, oxygen was a slow poison. It would eat away at their bodies from the inside. But that was not all. The planet shook without warning. Great cracks would open in the ground and swallow everything above. Mountains would explode and throw fire into the sky. Walls of water taller than buildings would crash against the shores. And above all of this, a yellow star poured deadly radiation down on the surface. Every single day, the crystal walls of the hall had turned a sickly gray. The representatives were disturbed. The storms alone are enough to kill, said a delegate from the Hollow Moons. His body was made of connected crystal spheres that chimed when he spoke. Wind speeds that would tear our ships apart. And the radiation, added Commander Reth of the Vorn Dominion. He was a massive creature covered in black armor. His people were warriors, but even he looked uncomfortable. How could anything survive such constant exposure? Velith nodded at each comment. You understand our concern. Our scientists have run every possible simulation. They have tested every theory. And they have reached a conclusion that is beyond doubt. She paused to let her words settle. Earth is uninhabitable. No intelligent species could possibly live there. We recommend that the Council classify it as a Category 9 death world. All contact should be forbidden. No ship should approach within 10 light years of the system. Murmurs of agreement spread through the hall. The representatives began to nod. It was sad, perhaps, that such a beautiful planet was so deadly. But the universe was full of beautiful dangers. This was simply one more. The vote was about to begin when something unexpected happened. High above the main floor, there was an observation gallery. It was meant for guests and visitors who wanted to watch the council at work. Most days it was empty. But today, a single figure stood there, looking down at the gathered aliens. She was small by galactic standards. Her skin was a warm brown color, and her dark hair was pulled back from her face. She wore simple clothes that looked strange next to the flowing robes and armor of the council members. She had been standing so quietly that no one had noticed her dot until she raised her hand and laughed. The sound cut through the hall like a blade. It was not a cruel laugh or a mocking one. It was the laugh of someone who had just heard the funniest joke in the universe. The kind of laugh that comes from deep in the belly and cannot be stopped. Every eye, every sensor, every sensory organ in the room turned to look at her. The crystal walls flickered with confusion, shifting between colors that had no name. Ambassador Veleth's pale face showed the closest thing her species had to shock. "You," she said, her voice no longer soft. "You are the creature we rescued. The one from the drifting ship." "Yes," the woman said. She was still smiling. "My name is Una, and I am from Earth." Silence fell over the council. It was the kind of silence that happens when the universe stops making sense. The representatives looked at each other. They looked at Una. They looked at the hologram of the deadly, poisonous, burning, freezing, shaking world that floated above them. "That is impossible," Commander Reth growled. "You heard the report. Nothing intelligent could survive on that planet." "And yet," Una said, "here I am." She began to walk down the stairs from the gallery. Her footsteps echoed in the silent hall. She moved without fear, without hesitation. She walked like someone who had faced much worse than a room full of confused aliens. "You'd call my world uninhabitable," she said as she descended. "You say no one could live there. You talk about the oxygen and the radiation and the storms like they are impossible challenges." She reached the bottom of the stairs and stood facing the council. She was tiny compared to most of them, but something in her eyes made her seem larger. "I have a question for you," Una said. "If Earth is uninhabitable, then how do you explain the 8 billion humans who live there right now?" A Primari delegate fainted. His body hit the floor with a soft thump. The crystal being from the hollow moons cracked 2 of his outer spheres in shock. Commander Reth's armored hand crushed the edge of his seat without him even noticing. Una looked around at the chaos she had caused. Her smile had not faded. "I think," she said calmly, "that we need to have a longer conversation." The crystal walls of the great hall had turned a color no one had ever seen before. It was the color of everything they thought they knew falling apart. And in the middle of it all, a small human woman from an impossible world stood waiting to tell them the truth. The great hall had not been this quiet in 1,000 years. The crystal walls had stopped changing colors entirely. They had settled into a strange gray that seemed to pulse with uncertainty. Every being in the room was staring at the small, human woman who stood at the center of the floor. Ambassador Veleth was the first to find her voice. She straightened her thin body and looked down at Una with eyes that held no warmth. "You claim to come from Earth," Veleth said slowly. "You claim that billions of your kind live on that world. Do you understand how impossible that sounds?" "I understand that it sounds impossible to you," Una replied. Her voice was calm and steady. "But that does not make it untrue." "Then explain," Commander Reth demanded. He had recovered from his shock and was now leaning forward in his seat. His black armor gleamed under the lights. "Explain how your species survives conditions that would kill any of us in moments." Una nodded. She had been waiting for this question her whole life. She just had not known it until now. "May the first use the display?" she asked, pointing to the hologram projector. Veleth hesitated, then stepped aside. "You may." Una walked to the projector and began to work its controls. She had learned how to use alien technology during her time on the station. The humans who had built her rescue ship had been clever, and she had inherited their curiosity. The hologram of Earth disappeared. In its place appeared an image of a massive spinning column of wind. It was tearing across a flat landscape, pulling up everything in its path. "This is called a tornado," Una said. "It is a storm made of spinning air. The winds inside can move faster than any vehicle you have ever built. It destroys everything it touches." The representatives shifted nervously. Several of them made sounds of distress. "On my world," Una continued, These storms happen every year, sometimes hundreds of them in a single season. They strike without much warning. They level entire towns in minutes. She paused and looked around the room. And do you know what humans do? They rebuild. They study the storms. They learn to predict them. They build shelters underground where they can hide. And when the storm passes, they come back up and start again. She changed the image. Now the display showed a massive wall of water rushing toward a coastline. Buildings crumbled before it like toys. This is a tsunami, she said. A wave caused by earthquakes beneath the ocean. It can travel faster than a flying ship. When it hits land, it washes away everything. People, homes, entire cities. Counselor Myris of the Ethy Collective made a soft sound. Her species was empathic. She could feel emotions from others. Right now, she was feeling something from Una that she had never encountered before. It was not fear. It was not despair. It was something else entirely. After a tsunami, Una said, humans do not abandon the coast. They do not run away to safer lands. They bury their dead. They mourn. And then they build again in the same place, because that is their home. She changed the image again. This time, it showed a frozen landscape. White stretched to the horizon in every direction. The cold was visible in the way the air itself seemed to shimmer. This is the place we call the Arctic, Una said. The temperature there drops so low that exposed skin freezes in minutes. The sun disappears for months at a time. Food is almost impossible to find. Surely no one lives there, a delegate said. His voice was hopeful, like he wanted at least one part of Earth to be empty. People have lived there for thousands of years, Una replied. They learned to build homes from ice. They learned to hunt animals that most would consider impossible to catch. They made clothing from the skins of creatures that swim in frozen waters. They did not just survive. They built cultures. They raised families. They told stories and sang songs in the endless dark. The hall was completely still. Even the air seemed to have stopped moving. A door at the side of the room opened. A man walked in. He was human, like Una, with short black hair and a quiet face. He moved to stand beside her and gave a small bow to the council. This is Tay, Una said. He was on the ship with me when you found us. He's going to help me show you something. Tay held up a small device. He pressed a button, and the hologram changed to show photographs. Real images captured by human hands on Earth. The first image showed children playing in snow. They were laughing, their faces red from cold, their small bodies wrapped in thick clothing. They were throwing balls of frozen water at each other. They are playing, Counselor Myris whispered. In conditions that would kill my people in an hour, they are playing. The next image showed farmers working in a field under a blazing sun. Sweat poured down their faces. The heat was visible in the way the air bent and twisted above the ground. But they were smiling as they worked. The temperature in that image is hot enough to damage most of the equipment in this room, Tay said softly. But those farmers will work until sunset. Then they will go home, eat dinner with their families, and wake up the next day to do it again. More images followed. Fishermen on small boats in the middle of a storm, waves crashing over them while they hauled in their nets. Miners working deep underground where the pressure would crush an unprotected body. Climbers on the side of a mountain so tall that the air itself became thin and dangerous dot in every image. Humans were not just surviving. They were living. They were working and laughing and loving and creating. They were doing all the things that intelligent beings do, in conditions that should have killed them 1,000 times over. How? Ambassador Velith asked. Her voice had lost its coldness. Now it held only confusion. How is any of this possible? Una turned off the display. She looked at the ambassador with eyes that held centuries of human struggle and triumph. Because we had no choice, she said simply. Earth is the only world we have ever known. We could not leave. We could not escape. So we adapted. We learned. We grew stronger. Every challenge that should have destroyed us made us better instead. She spread her hands, showing her small, soft human body. We are not built for survival. We have no armor like Commander Reth. We have no special senses like the Ethi. We cannot survive in vacuum like the Hollow Moon people. By every measure you use, we should be weak. We should be helpless. She smiled, and in that smile was something fierce. But we are not weak. We are not helpless. We are humans, and we do not know how to give up. The crystal walls of the great hall began to glow. Slowly at first, then brighter. They were turning gold, a color that meant something that had no word in any galactic language. It was the color of wonder. The golden glow in the crystal walls lasted only a few moments. Then Commander Reth rose from his seat, and the color began to fade. His massive armored body cast a shadow across half the hall. When he spoke, his voice was like stones grinding together. Words, he said. Pretty words and pretty pictures. But words can lie. Pictures can be faked. Una did not flinch. She had expected this. In her experience, those who wore armor on the outside often needed it because of what they felt on the inside. Fear dressed up as doubt. She understood that better than anyone. What would convince you? She asked. Reth stepped down from his platform. The floor shook slightly under his weight. Other delegates moved out of his way as he approached the center of the hall. He stopped a few feet from Una and looked down at her. She barely reached his chest. Proof, he said. Real proof. Let a delegation visit this Earth of yours. Let us see with our own eyes whether your impossible stories are true. Murmurs spread through the council. Some sounded worried. Others sounded curious. A few sounded almost excited. A delegation to a Category 9 death world, Ambassador Veleth said slowly. The danger would be extreme. We would need volunteers only. No one should be forced to take such a risk. I volunteer, Councilor Myris said immediately. She stood up, her delicate form seeming to glow with determination. I must know if what I felt from her is real. I must understand. The Vorn Dominion will send representatives, Reth growled. If these humans are truly as strong as they claim, my people need to know. One by one, other delegates stood. The being from the Hollow Moons chimed his agreement. A creature made of living shadow whispered that it would join. Within minutes, 12 representatives from 12 different worlds had volunteered. Yun watched them with a strange feeling in her chest. It was pride, she realized. Pride and something else. Hope, perhaps. Hope that the galaxy might finally understand what her people had accomplished. I have a condition, she said. The delegation will follow my instructions when we reach Earth. The planet is dangerous, yes. But the danger can be managed if you listen to those who know how to survive there. Reth made a sound that might have been a laugh. You think we need protection from a human? I think, Una replied calmly, that you will die within 1 hour of landing if you do not listen to me. The radiation alone will cook your organs inside your armor. But yes, Commander, if you prefer to learn that lesson the hard way, I will not stop you. For a long moment, Reth stared at her. Then, slowly, something changed in his posture. His shoulders relaxed just a tiny bit. His head tilted to one side. You have courage, he said. I will grant you that much. Very well. We will follow your instructions. The preparations took several days. The delegates were fitted with environmental suits designed to protect against the worst conditions known to galactic science. Air filters, radiation shields, temperature regulators, pressure compensators. Each suit cost more than most starships. Una supervised every fitting personally. She made adjustments based on her knowledge of Earth. She added extra cooling systems for those who would struggle with heat. She strengthened the joints for those whose bodies were not built for Earth's gravity. She worked tirelessly, sleeping only a few hours each night. Tay worked beside her, translating technical terms and helping to explain concepts that had no equivalent in alien languages. He was quieter than Una, more careful with his words. But when he spoke, people listened. There was a weight to his silence that made his words matter more. Finally, the ship was ready. It was called the Solace, a mid-sized vessel designed for long-range exploration. The Council had assigned it to the mission, along with a crew of experienced pilots. But Una shook her head when she saw the crew list. "No," she said. "We need human pilots." The Solace is a Council vessel, an administrator protested. "Our pilots are fully trained." "Your pilots have never entered an atmosphere like Earth's," Una replied. "They have never dealt with weather patterns that change in minutes. They have never landed on a planet where the ground itself might be trying to kill you. We need humans." She turned to Tay. "Contact Hannah and Wu. Tell them we need them." Hannah and Wu arrived 2 days later. They were the other survivors from Una's original ship. Hannah was tall for a human, with sharp eyes and quick hands. She had been flying ships since she was old enough to reach the controls. Wu was shorter, rounder, with a smile that never quite left his face. He was the best engineer Una had ever known. "You want us to fly a council ship to Earth," Hannah said when she heard the plan. "With a dozen aliens who think our planet is a death trap." "Yes," Una said, "and we are going to prove that humans are not just survivors, but something more." "Yes." Hannah looked at Wu. Wu looked at Hannah. Then they both started to grin. "When do we leave?" Wu asked. The Solace departed from Nexus Station on a clear morning, if morning meant anything in the endless dark of space. The delegates gathered in the observation deck as the station grew smaller behind them. Some were nervous. Some were excited. All of them were wondering what waited for them at the end of their journey. Counselor Myra stood near the front window, watching the stars drift past. She had been feeling emotions from the humans ever since they came aboard. There was fear there, yes. Even humans felt fear. But underneath the fear was something stronger. Something that burned like a steady flame. She did not have a word for it in her language. But she thought she might learn one soon. The journey took 30 cycles. The ship jumped through fold after fold of space, crossing distances that would have taken centuries at normal speeds. During the journey, Una gave lectures about Earth. She taught the delegates about weather patterns and tectonic activity. She explained the seasons, the tides, the way the planet's tilt created endless variation across its surface. The delegates listened with growing disbelief. Every new fact seemed more impossible than the last. And yet here were 4 humans, living proof that everything Una said was true. On the final day, Hannah called everyone to the observation deck. "We're about to drop out of hyperspace," she announced. "I wanted you to see this." The ship shuddered once. The stars outside the window blurred, then snapped back into focus. And there, filling the entire view, was Earth. It was more beautiful than any hologram could capture. Blue oceans sparkled under the light of a yellow sun. White clouds swirled in patterns that seemed almost alive. Green and brown landmasses spread across the surface like a painting made by gods. Several delegates had to be helped to seats. One passed out entirely. Commander Reth stood frozen, his armored hands pressed against the window. "It is real," he whispered. "It is actually real." Una stood beside him, looking at her home for the first time in over a year. Tears ran down her face, but she was smiling. "Welcome to Earth," she said softly. "Try not to die." Hannah laughed and guided the ship into the atmosphere. Below them, a world of wonders and terrors waited. And for the first time in galactic history, alien eyes would see it up close. The solace cut through Earth's atmosphere like a knife through water. The ship shook and rattled as it descended. Warning lights flashed across every console. Alarms screamed about temperature spikes and pressure changes. The delegates gripped their seats with whatever limbs they had, certain that death was coming. But Hannah sat calmly at the controls, her hands moving with practiced ease. Beside her, Wu monitored the ship's systems and made small adjustments whenever something came close to failing. They had done this before, not in this ship, but in others. Entering Earth's atmosphere was just another day for a human pilot. Beginning final approach, Hana announced. Landing zone is a valley in Korea. Mountains on 3 sides, open field in the center. Should be a smooth touchdown. The clouds parted, and suddenly the delegates could see the ground rushing up to meet them. Green hills covered in trees. A winding river that sparkled in the sunlight. Small buildings scattered across the landscape like toys dropped by a careless child. The ship landed with barely a bump. Hannah powered down the engines and turned to face the passengers. "Welcome to Earth," she said. "Please remember to follow all safety instructions. And try not to panic." The main hatch opened. Warm air rushed into the ship, carrying smells that none of the aliens had ever encountered. Grass and flowers and something else. Something living. Something wild. Yuna was the first to step outside. She walked down the ramp and onto the ground of her home world. The grass bent under her feet. The sun warmed her face. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, filling her lungs with air that the galaxy called poison. "Come," she said to the delegates. "See for yourselves." One by one, they emerged from the ship. Their environmental suits hummed and beeped as sensors went wild. Radiation warnings flashed. Atmospheric alerts screamed. Temperature gauges climbed toward. Dangerous levels but nothing happened. The delegates stood on the surface of a death world. And they did not die. "This is impossible," the being from the hollow moons chimed. His crystal body caught the sunlight and scattered it in rainbow patterns. "My suit says I should already be experiencing cellular damage. But I feel nothing wrong." "Your suit is designed for short exposure," Yuna explained. "It assumes you will leave quickly. But humans live here every day. Our bodies have adapted to handle what your suits cannot." Commander Reth took a heavy step forward. The ground sank slightly under his weight. He looked around at the peaceful valley, at the mountains rising in the distance, at the blue sky stretching overhead. "Where is the danger?" he asked. "You spoke of storms and earthquakes and fire from the sky. I see only beauty." "The danger is always there," Yuna said. "It is just waiting. Earth does not attack constantly. It strikes when you least expect it. That is what makes it so deadly. And that is what makes humans so strong. We have learned to be ready for anything at any moment." Over the following days, Yuna took the delegation across Korea. She showed them things that made their scientific knowledge shake and crumble. They visited a coastal city named Bizen. Millions of people lived there, right next to an ocean that could swallow them all with a single wave. The delegates watched in amazement as humans walked along the beach, laughing and playing in water that could turn deadly without warning. "They know the danger," Counselor Myris said softly. She was feeling the emotions of the crowd around them. Joy, peace, love, not a trace of fear. "They know, and they choose to stay anyway. The ocean gives us food," Tay explained. "It gives us trade routes and beauty and a sense of connection to something larger than ourselves. The danger is part of the bargain. We accept it because the rewards are worth the risk." They traveled to the mountains where the air grew thin and cold. There, in a small house built from wood and stone, They met an old woman named Bora. Her face was lined with age, her hair white as snow, but her eyes were sharp and bright. She served them tea in small cups, moving with a grace that seemed impossible for someone so old. Through Tay's translation, she told them stories. Stories of her life on this impossible world. She had survived 3 wars. She had lived through earthquakes that destroyed her home twice. She had lost her husband to a flood and her son to a disease that swept through the land. And yet here she was, still standing, still smiling, still offering tea to strangers from distant stars. How? The shadow creature asked. Its voice was like whispers in a dark room. How do you endure such loss and continue? Bora thought about the question for a long moment. Then she spoke, and Tay translated her words carefully. Because the sunrise still comes, she said. Because the flowers still bloom in spring. Because my grandchildren still laugh when they play. The world takes much from us, but it also gives. As long as it keeps giving, we keep living. The delegates were silent. They had no response to such simple wisdom. They met a farmer named Day who worked land that flooded every monsoon season. Each year, the waters would rise and destroy his crops. Each year, he would wait for the waters to recede and plant again. When asked why he did not move to safer ground, he laughed. "This is my family's land," he said. "My grandfather farmed here. My father farmed here. I will farm here until I die, and then my daughter will farm here after me." The floods are just part of the story. They met a doctor named Nari who worked in a hospital during the hottest days of summer. The heat outside was enough to kill an unprotected Primari in minutes. But Nari moved through the building with calm efficiency, treating patients who had collapsed from the temperature. "Summer is always hard," she admitted. "People get sick. Some die. But we save more than we lose. And each year, we get better at it. That is what humans do. We learn, we improve. We never stop trying." Each night, the delegation returned to the solace. They huddled together, processing what they had seen. Their scientific instruments recorded data that contradicted everything they knew about survival. Their minds struggled to accept what their eyes had shown them. Counselor, Myris began keeping a detailed log of her observations. She wrote late into each night, trying to capture the feeling that grew stronger with each passing day. "They do not just endure," she recorded one evening. "They embrace their world. They find joy in chaos. They make art from suffering. They love a planet that is constantly trying to kill them. And somehow, impossibly, that love makes them stronger." She paused, staring at the words on her screen. "I came here expecting to study a primitive species, barely clinging to survival," she continued. "Instead, I found something else entirely. Something my people have forgotten. Something the whole galaxy may have lost." She thought for a long moment, then added one final line. "I found hope." Outside the ship, the stars of Earth's night sky blazed bright and clear. And somewhere in the darkness, a human child looked up at those same stars and wondered what wonders waited there. Neither knew that they were wondering about each other. The Solace returned to Nexus Station on a quiet day. The great docking bay was nearly empty when the ship settled into its berth. But word spread quickly. By the time the main hatch opened, a crowd had gathered. Representatives from every species on the station pressed forward, desperate to know what the delegation had found. Commander Reth was the first to emerge. He walked down the ramp slowly, his armored body seeming somehow different. Smaller, perhaps, or maybe just more humble. The crowd parted before him, expecting him to speak, but he said nothing. He simply walked past them all, his eyes distant, his mind clearly somewhere else. The other delegates followed one by one. Each of them wore the same strange expression. They looked like people who had seen something that changed them forever. Something they were still trying to understand. Finally, Una appeared at the top of the ramp. She stood there for a moment, looking out at the gathered aliens. Then she smiled and walked down to join them. "The Council will want a full report," Ambassador Vela said. She had been waiting near the front of the crowd. Her pale skin flickered with colors that had no name. "We have many questions." "I know," Una replied, "and we will answer all of them." The formal report was delivered 3 days later in the Great Hall of the Nexus Station. The same hall where Una had first raised her hand and laughed. The crystal walls glowed a soft white as the delegates took their seats. Every representative from every member world was present. This was history, and no one wanted to miss it. Councilor Myris presented the findings. She stood at the center of the floor with a projection system floating beside her. Image after image appeared as she spoke. Images of humans living in impossible conditions. Images of cities built in places that should have been graveyards. Images of children laughing in environments that would kill most of the beings watching. "Our instruments recorded everything," Myra said. Her voice was steady, but there was emotion beneath it. "The data confirms what we saw with our own eyes. Earth is every bit as dangerous as our initial survey suggested. Perhaps more so. We experienced a minor earthquake during our visit. What the humans called minor, anyway. It would have destroyed most structures on my homeworld." She paused, letting that sink in. "And yet," she continued, 8 billion humans live there. They do not merely survive. They thrive. They have built a civilization that spans their entire planet. They have art and music and science and love. They have everything that we have, and they built it all while fighting for their lives every single day." The hall was absolutely silent. The crystal walls had stopped glowing entirely, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Commander Reth rose from his seat. Everyone turned to look at him. He was known throughout the galaxy as a warrior without equal. His people valued strength above all else. What he said next would carry tremendous weight. "I went to Earth expecting to find weakness," he said slowly. His voice echoed through the hall. "I thought these humans must be fragile creatures, protected from their world by luck or technology. I was wrong." He looked directly at Una. "Humans are the strongest species I have ever encountered. Not because of armor or weapons or technology, but because of something inside them. Something that refuses to break. Something that looks at impossible odds and laughs." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Reth had never spoken like this before. Never shown anything but contempt for species he considered weak. "My people have a word," he continued. "We use it for warriors who fight until their last breath, who never surrender, who would rather die than give up. I never thought I would use that word for an entire species, but I use it now for humans." He placed his armored fist over his chest, the highest salute in Vorn culture. "They have earned my respect." Ambassador Vela stepped forward. Her face showed the closest thing her species had to embarrassment. "We owe you an apology," she said to Una. "We called your world uninhabitable. We said no intelligent life could survive there. We were arrogant. We thought we understood the universe. We did not." Una shook her head gently. "You were not arrogant. You were simply looking at the problem from the wrong direction. You saw a dangerous world and assumed danger meant death. But danger is not death. It is a teacher. It made us who we are." She stepped to the center of the floor where the hologram projector waited. With a gesture, she brought up an image of Earth, the beautiful blue marble that she called home. "Every storm we survived made us stronger," she said. "Every earthquake taught us to build better. Every flood showed us how to adapt. We did not succeed despite Earth's challenges. We succeeded because of them." She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of every species in the room. "The galaxy has spent millions of years searching for safe worlds. Comfortable worlds. Worlds where life is easy. But perhaps that is the wrong approach. Perhaps the best species are forged in fire. Perhaps true strength only comes from struggle. The crystal walls began to glow again. Gold and white in colors that had never been seen before. The building was responding to something new. Something powerful. We are not asking for special treatment, Una continued. We are not asking you to fear us or worship us. We only ask that you understand us. We are humans. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day of our existence. And we did not just survive. She smiled, the same smile she had worn when she first laughed in this very hall. We laughed. The vote that followed was unanimous. Earth was reclassified from Category 9 Death World to Category 1 Protected Planet. Humanity was offered full membership in the Galactic Council. Trade routes were established. Cultural exchanges were planned. The isolation of Earth was over. Months later, the first official delegation from the Council arrived on Earth. They came not as judges or scientists, but as students. They wanted to learn. They wanted to understand how a species could look at fire and ice, poison and radiation, and call it home. And on a hillside in Korea, an old woman named Bora served tea to beings from distant stars. Una sat beside her, translating stories of floods and wars and earthquakes. Stories of loss and love and the unbreakable human spirit. The aliens listened in wonder. Some wept, though they had no tear ducts. Some sat in perfect stillness, processing emotions they had never felt before. All of them understood that they were witnessing something precious. Something that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Hope, resilience, the simple, stubborn refusal to give up. When the tea was finished and the stars began to appear in the evening sky, Bora looked up at them and smiled. These same stars that her ancestors had wondered about for thousands of years now held friends instead of mysteries. The universe was no longer empty. It was full of beings who had finally learned the truth about her. World. Earth was not uninhabitable. It was simply waiting for a Phi Earth. Species strong enough to call it home. And humans had answered that call. They had raised their hands. They had laughed, and they had won.